For today's review, we are looking at the Monitor, who is the build figure in this Crisis on Infinite Earths build wave. Now, build figures do not include data profile cards, unfortunately, so there is no read-up to provide context to who this character is. If you are curious in any way of who this character is at all, just search him up on Google and you'll get that Wikipedia page. I'll give you plenty of information on who he is, the lore, everything. I can't remember any of that on the top of my head because I'm not good at memorizing certain things, and the only thing I remember of his role in the story is the fact that he just gathers heroes from across the multiverse and warns them of a great crisis. The very thing at the beginning. That's the only thing I remember of him. So, yeah, I apologize for not having information or a little summary of who this character is for you. All right, let's talk about the figure because that's also why we're here doing this review. Did Mcfarlane do a good job with taking the source material and translating it into plastic? In my opinion, I think they did. So, on the back of these boxes for these build waves, there is also a comic book image of what the build figure looks like in the source material that they are using. And when you look at this photo and you look at this figure, I think they did a really good job capturing that design. It's not that far off. And one thing that they also did, which we can now move on to aesthetics, because let's talk about the aesthetics of this figure, is the fact that they added more details to areas that did not even need it. So a lot of these comic book design figures these days, they don't use this kind of texturing anymore. You don't see a whole lot of this, which is kind of sad because there was a period where they did do a lot of this kind of stuff for some of the comic book design figures that we have gotten. Ghostmaker is definitely the best example of that. If you have that figure, you would know how cool that figure looks because of the details that they put on pretty much everything on him. And it's similar to just the way they did the textures on this figure too. So, and another character I can think of that they released, what was his name? Was it Grifter? Could be forgetting his name. It's like that. It's the dude with the red mask. He has like a green jacket. He's from the Wildstorm comics, I think. I think his name was Grifter. Yeah, he also has like really good texturing as well. So they've done this on a few figures before. So this is nothing new to them. This is not like anything crazy. And one, this does not justify this build figure to cost, $160 to build, because that's essentially how much you have to drop on this wave just to build this guy. And that goes into the question where, is this guy even worth it as a build figure? And in my opinion, no, he's not. Because one, all this detail they've done before, right? So that doesn't really justify the cost. And then two, this is a character that I honestly think some of you, or probably most of you, don't even know who he is. You don't even recognize this character because he shows up one time. Well, that's how I remember him. He only shows up in the Crisis story. I don't know if he appears anymore after that. He could, right? He could be. If you know that information, do share in the comments. But most of you don't recognize who this guy is. And I don't blame you because he's pretty much another example of a very niche character. But he shouldn't have been the build figure. And one thing I've said in the past, and I think I've said it in some other videos, I like when they make characters that we don't know anything about into figures because it gives them a spotlight. And that's something I like. But to treat this as a build figure, I don't think was the right move. Because that also makes people have a less incentive to pursue this build figure, especially when you look at how much you have to spend on the entirety of this build wave. And that's not good. So he should have been part of the wave as one of the figures. They could have released like one of the other ones in a different way, right? I mean, a good example is like the Earth 2 Robin that they recently released as a MTD, Mcfarlane Toys Digital Wave thing, whatever that thing was called. He's from Crisis. That's the source material that they took from. They could have done that with Kid Flash, Just like what they did with Firestorm as a collector edition. They could have separated some of these releases. And in my opinion, the figure that should have been the build figure should have not been this guy. Like, he should be part of this wave, right? But Anti-Monitor should have been the build figure. I don't know why they didn't do that. There would have been, I guess, maybe a better incentive to buy this wave if he was the build figure, because Anti-Monitor is a little bit more well-known, I guess, compared to Monitor, because he's appeared a little bit more. I remember him best from Green Lantern, the animated series, so, you know, he's been depicted more often in more other comic source materials, so there's been many, like, times where they use the character. And also, he's big, right? So the thing about build figures for quite a long time now has been the fact that most of them have been pretty sizable, right? Let me just name a few. You know, you look back at the Flashpoint build wave, you got that Cyborg. You look back at, like, the Atrocitus build wave, you have Atrocitus. And then, what's another? Even the Dark Knight's Return wave, where you build a freaking horse. That thing was massive, right? Like, it's a pretty big size horse. Maybe way too big, but, you know, what I'm trying to get at is that every build wave, the characters have been at least a little bit taller than their wave mates. And this guy is pretty much just your regular, you know, DC Multiverse figure, and he could have been released in different ways. So that's just my thought. All right. Let's continue to talk about aesthetics. So outside of these texturing stuff that we have on most of the body, as you can see, where it's trying to mimic like some sort of fabric, and it's all the way down here as well, as I'm trying to speak. Even this part is really heavily textured. And again, it's nice that they did this. It's really cool that they put in this effort on this build figure. But it makes you question, why didn't they do this with the other figures in this wave? You look at, you know, Kid Flash, Psycho Pirate, Spectres like Cape, right, for example, and even the Earth 2 Superman. There's not really much details on those figures. It's just paint, you know, but there's no texturing like this. And yeah, as far as head sculpt, I think they did a pretty good job with that. It's pretty spot on to what he looks like. There's nothing I can really say about it. I like the way it turned out. I like the fact that he's mad because, you know, he wants to stop the Anti-Monitor. So I like that expression on his face. And something I do want to show with this figure, which I never showed with any of my previous figures, is the fact that for me, I can pop this head off really easily, so I can show how the capes look like, which I've never shown what they look like on the inside, so how you put these on. So on the back of this figure, you have this port right here, and then on the front, you also have these two ports. And what's cool is that, you know, when you're assembling this thing, you get to see just how they put these on. In most cases, they're glued in, from what I can tell, but because this is a build figure, you have to assemble it, and they did a pretty good job assembling, you know, this one and actually making it stay in place. Because what was it? I think it was the Dark Fodder. The Dark Fodder had like a front peg for the cape, and that doesn't stay in because it was too small. This one, they did a really good thing by changing it, and it stays in pretty nicely. So just want to share that. And then you just pop the head back on. And yeah, when you look at the back of the cape, it's all textured. It's beautiful, right? Everything on the back is the same thing. It's all textured. The yellows on here, I think, could stand out a little bit more. Honestly, I felt like if the yellows were the same as the yellow or gold, well, actually, yeah, this is gold, up here, it would have made more sense. But, you know, it is what it is. And actually, in the source material, it's not actually that yellow. It's supposed to be gold. Like, you can tell it's supposed to be shiny. So they could have painted these yellow bits for his arm and his feet right here, you know, where his boots are, a little bit better. But nothing you can't do by yourself if you're a customizer, if you have this figure, of course. So there is that. All right, let's talk about articulation. So when it comes to articulation, you can't really look up too much. It's very limited. He can look down better than he can look up, which is weird. He can't turn his head all the way. This thing kind of hinders his head articulation. Not the worst, you know, compared to some of the figures we've gotten where some of these collar pieces do hinder the head articulation. As for his arm, it can spread up. It can go this way. It cannot go up because this shoulder piece gets in the way. And it can't really go back because the cape also gets in the way. He does have your usual double jointed articulation, as you can see right here. Swivel in the hands, articulation in those sculpted ball joints, and of course swivel in the arms up here. So pretty good. And as for his upper abdomen, there is really good mobility there, which I do like. So he can crunch a little bit forward, which at least that's good. He can lean back, not exactly the best. And as for his waist, there is movement down here, right? So that's good. And for his legs, they do kick out pretty okay, even with the skirt piece being the hindrance on his leg articulation. He can double joint, which is good. He also can move his feet down here, and there is swivel and there is toe articulation. And even with these side parts of his skirt piece, he can spread his legs out pretty good. So yeah, articulation wise, everything is pretty standard. And you're not really gonna get this guy into like crazy action poses because I mean, you can if you want to. It's something you can do. Be creative. But at least his articulation is still good and it's not the worst. And now we can do comparisons. So of course we got to bring in the Anti-Monitor once more because they are opposites of each other. And having these two on my shelf has made it pretty fun because, you know, I had the Anti-Monitor for quite some time because he came out before this wave, I think, was even a thing. So I needed the monitor to kind of complete that. And I'm really happy to have both of them in my shelf. And that's pretty cool. And then, of course, another figure that I can bring in to compare how tall he is next to a regular DC Multiverse figure. There you got Mr. Bloom, which we'll be looking at very soon in the future. So there's that. Cool. And let's just bring in this random, 12-inch scale Spin Master DC figure. Yeah, he's very tiny next to that, of course, and it's the Dark Flash. So way too tall. But there you have it. There is our look at the monitor. And yeah, my final verdict is this should have not been a build figure. It is a good figure for what it is, just not worth the cost to spend and build. He should have been just a regular figure released within the wave or in a separate way. And of course, the Anti-Monitor should have been the build figure. That is my opinion. And yeah. Well, if you found my review on the monitor informative, do give this video a like. If you want to subscribe to my channel to see more action figure content and whatever else I do on the channel, you can. You do not have to. In the end of the day, I make these videos for fun. And with that said, take care, and I will see you in the next video.